If you were to ask a random person on the street who is the only athlete that Nike have ever built a statue of, who do you think they'd say? And by the way, it is pronounced Nike. Shoe Dog himself, Phil Knight, said that, so don't slag me off in the comments. Anyway, who do you think they'd say? MJ, LeBron, Tiger, Serena, Roger, Ronaldo? It's none of these. What if I was to tell you that actually Nike have built a statue of a runner who was never professional or won a gold medal? Well, that's exactly who they built a statue of, and his name is Steve Prefontaine. So today I'm going to tell you who this guy is and how he embodied the just do it spirit like nobody else. Steve Prefontaine made running cool. In the late 1960s and 70s, runners were treated as lunatics. People looked at runners and thought, who in their right mind would do that for fun? People passing runners in their cars would shout and spit at them, and police would often stop them suspecting they had committed crimes. But then there was Pre, a long-distance runner who ran for the University of Oregon under the famous coach Bill Bowerman, who went on to co-found Nike with Phil Knight by initially making shoes in his wife's waffle iron. But that's another story. But Pre was the first guy to get people excited about running. When he was racing, the college track was filled to the rafters. If you closed your eyes, you'd think you were listening to a college football crowd, not a crowd desperate to watch a group of men run around a track a few times. But why was this? How could one guy make people desperate to watch what a lot of people would consider to be one of the most boring spectator sports out there? Well, one thing was definitely the porno-tash. But the main thing was that he was the Muhammad Ali of running. Pre had a mouth like no other, but the moves to back it up. His interviews and track performances were poetry in motion, with many of his quotes becoming crystallized as Nike slogans. Major publications like Runner's World were enamored with his charm. He looked like a rock star and often partied like it too. Often up till the late hours and religiously waking up at 6 AM every morning for a 10-mile run to sweat out the beer. But what intrigued so many people most was his utter relentlessness on the track. Although often smaller than all his competitors and with shorter legs, Pre would decide to take the lead as early as possible in almost every race. He forced his opposition to actually race, rather than coast through the majority and rely on their end-of-race kick. And it was this strategy that earned him the reputation of being the most fascinating college athlete to watch in the US at the time, because he was the first guy to really embody the phrase, leaving everything on the track. There would be times he would be dominating a race by 200 or 300 meters, yet his lap time somehow managed to get quicker despite having nobody near him. And there was the time in which 3 days before one of the most important races of the season that he suffered a foot gash that required 12 stitches. Yet despite this, he somehow managed to run on what basically became an open wound again to win his 3-mile race for his team. And there was the time that he managed to make the 1972 Olympic 5,000 meter race the most exciting of all time by sacrificing his near-on certainty of a medal by taking the race to the competition and unfortunately falling short in 4th place at the line. What made this extraordinary was at the time US runners were not allowed to turn pro compared to the Europeans, so Pre was a 21-year-old college amateur runner up against the world's best professional Europeans and was a whisker away from showing them up. But aside from this loss, he was a proven winner. He won 78% of his races at high school and college, and by the time of his last race, he held every American record from 2,000 to 10,000 meters. But unfortunately, he passed away in a car accident at the age of 24, a year before the Montreal Olympics, in which he was tipped to win gold medals and break world records whilst doing so. So why did Nike build a statue of him? Well, because if it wasn't for Pre, they probably wouldn't have gotten off the ground. In 1973, only a couple of years after starting up, Nike, which was at the time known as Blue Ribbon Sports, gave Pre a stipend of $5,000 to promote the brand. And he went on to work shifts at the original Nike store and would travel around the country to lead running clinics and introduce people to Nike running shoes, effectively leading their first ever marketing strategies as their National Director of Public Affairs. At that time, nobody would wear Nike, and Adidas was by far the most dominant brand, but Pre wanted to change that because he wanted to repay Bowerman and Knight, who had helped him with his cost of livings, when he was someone who actually spent the majority of his career living in a trailer and on food stamps. So off his own initiative, Pre would send boxes of Nikes to all the elite athletes throughout the country along with handwritten notes. And he would turn up to meets with boxes and boxes of these shoes in his cars and persuade everyone he could to try them out. And it also helped that he did have the persuasion skills of someone who could sell ice to Eskimos. And then the next thing you knew, everyone wanted to get their hands on a pair of Nikes. Pre's reputation and everything he stood for made people want to wear the shoes of a completely unheard of brand with no reputation at the time. Almost overnight they exploded, becoming the upstart brand that was aligned to the explosion of interest in running that Pre had caused not only in Oregon, but rapidly across the entire United States. In his short time working for the company, Steve Prefontaine ended up giving as much to Nike as he would often give on the track. It was his relentlessness and just do it mentality that inspired everyone he came into contact with. He made the early Nike employees believe that they could dethrone the big players like Adidas and Asics. And because of that, Nike will forever remain indebted. So that's why today at their headquarters in Beaverton, Oregon, stands a statue of Steve Prefontaine, the only athlete they have ever given the honor to.